The sharp crack of Karen Whitmore's designer tennis shoes against the lake cabin's hardwood deck sounded like gunshots echoing across the pristine water. But that rhythmic clicking was nothing compared to the thunderous silence that would soon fill every major news network when she discovered that breaking into private property to confront global superstars becomes exponentially more expensive when you interrupt high-level political meetings with state officials who have the authority to destroy entire careers with a single phone call. But here's the thing about entitled HOA presidents who wear pristine white tennis outfits like battle armor and treat celebrity privacy rights like personal suggestions. They never expect to burst through lakeside doors and find themselves face-to-face with the most powerful law enforcement official in the state, who's been waiting months for an excuse to investigate systematic HOA corruption and just witnessed the perfect example of breaking and entering by someone stupid enough to document their own crimes. By the time I finished coordinating the media response and damage control, this tennis-obsessed suburban dictator had transformed from community leader to unemployable social pariah faster than her white Range Rover could speed away from crime scenes. Seriously, what would you do if some HOA Karen broke into your private retreat while you're conducting confidential government business with officials who could end her entire professional existence? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I need to see if this level of political suicide exists in your area too. Let me back up and explain how this whole career assassination started. My name is Nathan Ross, and I've been Taylor Swift's executive assistant and security coordinator for 6 years. When you work for someone whose every move generates international headlines and whose business empire requires coordination with entertainment lawyers, record executives, and occasionally government officials for various charitable and political initiatives, you learn to expect meetings that range from routine business to discussions that could influence state policy. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the moment when our carefully orchestrated private meeting with State Attorney General Patricia Morrison was interrupted by a delusional HOA president who'd apparently decided that breaking and entering was an appropriate community governance technique. Taylor had purchased her Lake Harmony retreat 2 years ago, a stunning 4,200-square-foot cabin on 12 acres of pristine waterfront property that offered complete privacy for the kind of high-level meetings that required absolute discretion. The property sat on a private peninsula with its own boat dock, helicopter landing pad, and security systems that made government facilities look casual by comparison. The cabin served multiple purposes in Taylor's business operations: creative retreat for songwriting, secure location for sensitive business negotiations, and most importantly for this story, neutral venue for meetings with government officials who preferred to conduct certain discussions away from public buildings and media attention. Karen Whitmore, meanwhile, lived in a $3.8 million lakefront estate on the opposite shore, approximately 800 yards across the water from Taylor's private peninsula. At 35, Karen had spent the past 6 years transforming the Lake Harmony Homeowners Association from routine property management into what residents privately called the Karen Kingdom, a comprehensive surveillance and control operation that monitored every activity on the lake with the dedication of a federal intelligence agency. Picture this: Karen's daily uniform consisted of blindingly white tennis outfits that looked like they'd been designed by military contractors, every seam perfect, every accessory coordinated, every detail calculated to announce her authority to anyone within visual range. Her platinum blonde hair was styled in what expensive salons call the executive authority cut, sharp, angular, and helmet-like in its resistance to wind, rain, or rational criticism. She carried a white leather portfolio everywhere, even during her morning patrol boats rides, like some kind of maritime bureaucrat prepared to cite violations of aesthetic standards from international waters. Karen's Lake Harmony oversight activities had evolved far beyond reasonable HOA governance into comprehensive lifestyle monitoring for any resident who dared to use their own property in ways that didn't meet her personal approval. She'd invested $127,000 in surveillance equipment, including high-powered telescopes, digital cameras with telephoto lenses, and marine radar systems that tracked boat traffic with the precision of air traffic control. Her morning routine was legendary among Lake Harmony residents for all the wrong reasons. She'd emerge from her mansion at exactly 6:30 a.m. wearing her tennis whites and designer sunglasses, board her pristine white Boston Whaler powerboat, and conduct what she called community standards patrol that involved documenting any activity she deemed suspicious, inappropriate, or potentially violation of her interpretation of lakefront property guidelines. The trouble started 3 weeks ago, when Karen discovered that Taylor's property was being used for what she termed unauthorized commercial activities, based on her observation of multiple vehicles, security personnel, and helicopter traffic that clearly indicated business meetings rather than residential use. Karen's surveillance logs, which she maintained with military precision and legal admissibility, documented every visitor to Taylor's property, including arrival times, vehicle descriptions, and her personal assessment of whether each visit complied with residential zoning restrictions that she'd apparently memorized with the dedication of someone preparing for the bar exam. Her findings convinced her that Taylor was operating an illegal commercial facility disguised as a residential retreat, violating multiple zoning laws and HOA covenants while avoiding the proper permits and community notifications that Karen believed were required for any activity more complex than basic homeownership. But Karen's most significant discovery was her documentation of what appeared to be government vehicles and official license plates during several recent visits to Taylor's property. Her research into government database, conducted through connections she'd cultivated during her previous career as a municipal regulatory coordinator, revealed that Taylor was apparently hosting meetings with high-level state officials without proper community notification or security coordination with local law enforcement. In Karen's entitled mind, this represented not just HOA violations but potential security risks to the entire Lake Harmony community that required immediate intervention by someone with the authority and courage to confront celebrity privilege and government corruption. Here's where Karen made her first catastrophic error in judgment. She convinced herself that her HOA authority granted her law enforcement powers that included the right to investigate suspicious activities on any property within her jurisdiction, regardless of ownership, privacy rights, or the minor legal technicalities that protected other people's constitutional rights. Her plan was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its legal consequences. She would conduct a surprise inspection of Taylor's property during the next confirmed government meeting, document the violations in real time, and present her findings to appropriate authorities as evidence of systematic abuse of residential zoning laws and potential security risks to community safety. The plan required careful timing and tactical precision that Karen approached with the seriousness of someone planning a military operation rather than committing multiple felonies against one of the world's most protected celebrities during a confidential government meeting. Karen's surveillance had identified a pattern. High-level meetings at Taylor's cabin typically occurred on Tuesday mornings between 9 and 11 a.m., involved multiple security vehicles, and featured helicopter arrivals that Karen's marine radar systems could track from takeoff to landing. Her intelligence gathering had reached the sophistication level that would make federal agencies impressed and law enforcement very interested in her systematic stalking activities. Tuesday, October 15th, represented the perfect opportunity for Karen's enforcement action. Her surveillance had confirmed a scheduled high-level meeting involving multiple government vehicles, helicopter transport, and what appeared to be the highest level of security protocols she'd ever documented at Taylor's property. What Karen didn't know, and what would make her career suicide exponentially more spectacular, was that the meeting she'd chosen to interrupt involved State Attorney General Patricia Morrison's confidential briefing about a comprehensive investigation into HOA corruption, abuse of authority, and systematic violation of residents' civil rights that had been quietly developing for 8 months. Attorney General Morrison had specifically chosen Taylor's private retreat for this meeting because the investigation required absolute secrecy while discussing criminal prosecutions that could affect dozens of HOA officials across multiple counties. The security protocols Karen had observed weren't just celebrity protection. They were state-level law enforcement coordination for one of the most significant municipal corruption investigations in recent state history. The irony was mathematically perfect. Karen had spent weeks planning to confront what she believed was celebrity abuse of government connections, but she was actually about to interrupt a government meeting specifically focused on investigating people exactly like her, for exactly the kinds of systematic abuse she'd been perpetrating for years. At 9:47 a.m. on that Tuesday morning, as Attorney General Morrison was reviewing criminal evidence against 17 different HOA officials while Taylor listened to briefings about legislation designed to prevent systematic resident harassment, Karen Whitmore was approaching the cabin's back door with bolt cutters, a digital camera, and the kind of delusional confidence that transforms routine breaking and entering into career-ending political theater. The collision between Karen's entitled breaking and entering operation and the state attorney general's HOA corruption investigation was about to create the kind of real-time evidence that prosecutors dream about and defense attorneys have nightmares about, while generating enough political and media fallout to destroy Karen's entire professional existence in less time than it takes to complete a tennis match. The pristine morning silence of Lake Harmony shattered like expensive crystal when Karen Whitmore's bolt cutters made contact with the cabin's security chain. But that metallic snap was nothing compared to the career-ending explosion that would soon destroy her professional reputation. When she discovered that interrupting confidential government meetings while committing felony breaking and entering creates the kind of evidence that transforms municipal regulatory coordinators into unemployable social pariahs faster than her white tennis shoes could carry her back to her boat. But here's the thing about entitled HOA presidents who mistake surveillance equipment for law enforcement authority while wearing designer athletic wear like SWAT team uniforms. They never realize that some private meetings involve officials with the power to blacklist them from every government position in the state, while ensuring their criminal activities become front-page news in publications read by every potential employer in their field. Karen's approach to the cabin had been methodical and professionally suicidal. She documented her entire enforcement operation using the same digital camera and detailed logging system she employed for routine HOA violations, apparently believing that comprehensive evidence of her own criminal behavior would somehow legitimize breaking into someone's private property to confront celebrity corruption. Her surveillance log for that morning read like a confession written by someone who'd never heard of the Fourth Amendment. 9:43 a.m. Confirmed unauthorized government meeting in progress, multiple security violations observed, community notification requirements ignored, immediate intervention required to protect Lake Harmony residents from ongoing commercial zoning abuse. The cabin's back door had been secured with a simple chain lock that Karen's municipal regulatory experience had taught her to identify as inadequate security for commercial operations, claiming residential status. In her delusional mind, the relatively light security proved that Taylor was operating an illegal business facility rather than maintaining appropriate government meeting protocols. What Karen couldn't see through the cabin's privacy-tinted windows was the scene that would make her breaking and entering exponentially more catastrophic. State Attorney General Patricia Morrison sitting at the head of a conference table covered with evidence files, criminal investigation summaries, and arrest warrants that included the names of 17 HOA officials who'd been systematically abusing their authority in ways that perfectly matched Karen's own enforcement techniques. I was positioned near the cabin's security monitoring station when Karen's bolt cutters triggered our perimeter alarm system. The screens showed her approaching the back entrance wearing her standard white tennis outfit, carrying what appeared to be professional photography equipment, and moving with the confidence of someone who believed they had legal authority to enter private property uninvited. "Taylor, we have a situation," I announced quietly, not wanting to interrupt Attorney General Morrison's presentation, but needing to alert our security team to the developing threat. Taylor glanced at the monitor displaying Karen's approach and immediately recognized the seriousness of the situation. "Nathan, that's the HOA president who's been harassing our neighbors. Is she actually trying to break in during Patricia's briefing?" Attorney General Morrison looked up from her investigation files with the kind of professional interest that prosecutors develop when they witness crimes being committed in real time. "Ms. Swift, is this individual associated with a homeowners association?" "Yes, she runs the Lake Harmony HOA," Taylor replied. "She's been conducting surveillance on my property for months and filing harassment complaints about my business meetings." Morrison's expression shifted from curiosity to predatory satisfaction. "In that case, I suggest we let her complete whatever she's planning. My investigation could benefit from observing a HOA official demonstrating the exact type of behavior we're prosecuting." The decision to allow Karen to incriminate herself further was strategically brilliant and legally devastating for her future career prospects. Instead of stopping her criminal entry, we positioned security cameras to document every moment of her unauthorized access, while Attorney General Morrison prepared to witness firsthand the kind of systematic abuse that her investigation was designed to prosecute. Karen's entry technique revealed both her municipal regulatory background and her complete ignorance of legal boundaries between official authority and criminal behavior. She used bolt cutters with professional efficiency, photographed the evidence of her forced entry, and documented her actions with the thoroughness of someone filing an official report rather than committing felony breaking and entering. Her detailed notes, later recovered as evidence, showed the methodical thinking that would make her unemployable in any government position. Entry achieved through minimal security barrier, confirming inadequate protection for claimed residential use, proceeding with documentation of ongoing commercial violations and government corruption. The moment Karen stepped through the back door into the cabin's main conference area would later be described by legal experts as the most comprehensively documented career suicide in recent political history. She emerged from the entryway wearing her pristine white tennis outfit, carrying her camera and investigation materials, prepared to confront what she believed was celebrity abuse of government connections. Instead, she found herself face-to-face with the State Attorney General of Tennessee, surrounded by criminal investigation files, in the middle of a briefing about prosecuting people exactly like her for exactly the crimes she was committing. The silence that followed Karen's dramatic entrance lasted approximately 4 seconds and felt like 4 hours. Attorney General Morrison sat at the head of the conference table in her official capacity, surrounded by evidence files that included photographs of Karen's own surveillance activities and harassment campaigns. Taylor sat to Morrison's right, clearly recognizable as the property owner Karen was illegally confronting. 3 additional state investigators occupied the remaining chairs, all of whom were now witnessing Karen commit multiple felonies while wearing a tennis outfit. Karen's first words upon realizing she'd interrupted a high-level government meeting were both legally incriminating and professionally catastrophic. "I don't care who you people think you are. This property is being used for illegal commercial activities that violate community standards, and I have the authority to investigate and document violations regardless of celebrity connections or government corruption." Attorney General Morrison's response was measured, professional, and devastating in its implications for Karen's future employment prospects. "Ma'am, I'm Patricia Morrison, Attorney General for the state of Tennessee. You've just committed breaking and entering, criminal trespass, and interference with official government business. You're also interrupting a confidential briefing about prosecuting HOA officials for systematic abuse of authority." The color drained from Karen's face as she processed what Morrison had just said, but her response revealed that her delusional thinking was stronger than her survival instincts. This is obviously a setup to protect celebrity corruption. Real government officials don't hold secret meetings in private homes. I demand to see proper identification and meeting authorization. Morrison reached into her briefcase and produced her official credentials along with the state seal documentation that proved the meeting's legitimate government status. "Ma'am, this is an authorized investigation into municipal corruption. You've just provided real-time evidence of the exact behavior we're prosecuting." That's when Karen made the strategic error that would transform her career destruction from a localized disaster into a statewide scandal. Instead of recognizing the hopelessness of her situation and attempting damage control, she doubled down on her confrontational approach while continuing to document her own criminal behavior. "I'm not leaving until I complete my investigation of these illegal activities," she announced, raising her camera to photograph the government documents on the conference table. "The Lake Harmony community has a right to know about celebrity corruption and fake government meetings." Security footage captured Karen photographing classified investigation materials while threatening to continue her unauthorized access to private property during an official government briefing. Every word, every action, every moment of her political suicide was being recorded by multiple systems for eventual use in both criminal prosecution and employment background checks. Morrison's next statement would be quoted in law enforcement training materials as an example of how criminal behavior sometimes documents itself. "Ma'am, you're now photographing confidential law enforcement materials after committing breaking and entering. Continue your investigation if you wish, but understand that everything you're doing is being recorded as evidence." Karen's response revealed her complete inability to recognize when she'd destroyed her own career. "I want evidence of this corruption. The people of Tennessee deserve to know how celebrities buy government protection through fake meetings and fraudulent official credentials." She spent the next 7 minutes photographing government documents, threatening state officials, and providing comprehensive evidence of her criminal behavior while wearing a tennis outfit that would make her instantly recognizable in every news story about her arrest and career destruction. Meanwhile, I was coordinating with Taylor's security team to ensure that Karen's entire performance was captured from multiple angles with professional quality video that would later be broadcast on every major news network in the state. The footage would show a delusional HOA president breaking into private property, interrupting legitimate government business, and accusing the state attorney general of corruption while committing felonies in real time. Attorney General Morrison's final warning to Karen was both legally required and personally satisfying. "Ma'am, you have committed multiple felonies while interfering with official state business. You've also demonstrated the exact pattern of behavior that our investigation was designed to identify and prosecute. I recommend you contact an attorney immediately." Karen's exit was as professionally catastrophic as her entry. She gathered her evidence materials, announced that she would be reporting this corruption to proper authorities, and promised that real government officials would investigate the fake meeting she'd just documented. Her final words before leaving the cabin would be replayed on news broadcasts throughout the state. This conspiracy will be exposed. The people of Tennessee won't tolerate celebrity corruption protected by fake government officials. As Karen departed through the same door she'd illegally entered, Attorney General Morrison turned to Taylor with obvious satisfaction. "Ms. Swift, that was the perfect example of the behavior we've been investigating. Mrs. Whitmore just provided enough evidence to prosecute her for multiple felonies while demonstrating why our HOA oversight legislation is desperately needed." The meeting continued for another hour, but Karen's dramatic interruption had transformed the discussion from theoretical policy considerations to practical demonstration of why immediate action was required to prevent similar abuse by other HOA officials throughout the state. By the time Karen reached her boat and began her retreat across Lake Harmony, her career in municipal regulation was already over. The footage of her criminal behavior would be in the hands of every major news outlet within hours, and her name would become synonymous with HOA abuse and government harassment throughout Tennessee's political and professional communities. The war between Karen's delusional enforcement authority and actual government power had ended with complete destruction of her professional credibility, and she didn't even realize it yet. The news vans began arriving at Lake Harmony like mechanical vultures descending on career roadkill, their satellite dishes rising against the morning sky, as Karen Whitmore's professional reputation disintegrated faster than her white tennis outfit could absorb the panic sweat that erupted when she discovered that breaking into celebrity properties during state government meetings creates the kind of media feeding frenzy that transforms municipal regulatory coordinators into unemployable cautionary tales. But here's the thing about entitled HOA presidents who document their own felonious behavior while accusing state attorneys general of corruption. They never realize that some mistakes are so spectacularly public and politically catastrophic that every potential employer in their field will know their name before they can even update their resume to explain why their last position ended with criminal charges and statewide media coverage. The footage of Karen's cabin break-in had been in the hands of Channel 7 News within 30 minutes of her departure, thanks to my immediate coordination with Taylor's publicity team and Attorney General Morrison's strategic decision to make Karen's behavior a public example of why HOA oversight legislation was desperately needed. The video quality was devastating for Karen's future employment prospects. Professional security cameras had captured her methodical breaking and entering operation in high definition, showing her white tennis outfit, determined expression, and careful documentation of her own criminal behavior. The audio was even more damaging, preserving her accusations against the state attorney general and her demands to photograph confidential investigation materials. News anchor Sarah Martinez's initial report would be replayed thousands of times across social media platforms and become required viewing in public administration courses studying professional ethics failures. At 9:47 this morning, Lake Harmony HOA President Karen Whitmore broke into Taylor Swift's private cabin and interrupted a confidential meeting with State Attorney General Patricia Morrison. The incident was captured on security cameras and shows Whitmore using bolt cutters to gain unauthorized entry before confronting state officials and accusing them of corruption. The footage showed Karen in her pristine white tennis attire standing in Taylor's conference room, pointing accusingly at Morrison while demanding to photograph government documents. Her body language and vocal tone made it clear to viewers that she genuinely believed she had authority to investigate and confront state officials, revealing the depth of her delusional thinking about HOA power and celebrity privilege. But the most professionally damaging moment came when the cameras captured Karen's final statement before leaving the cabin. "This conspiracy will be exposed. The people of Tennessee won't tolerate celebrity corruption protected by fake government officials." The statement, broadcast statewide during the evening news cycle, showed Karen accusing the state attorney general of being a fake government official while standing in a conference room she'd illegally entered. Legal experts and political commentators immediately recognized the career-ending implications of her public behavior. Meanwhile, Karen was conducting her own damage control operation from her lakefront mansion, apparently believing that social media could repair the professional devastation she'd just inflicted on herself. Her Facebook post, published 3 hours after the news broke, revealed that she still didn't understand the scope of her career destruction. "This morning I witnessed clear evidence of celebrity corruption involving fake government meetings at an illegal commercial facility. Despite media lies, I was protecting the Lake Harmony community by investigating suspicious activities that threaten our residential zoning standards. Real government officials don't hold secret meetings in private homes without community notification. The post included photographs she'd taken inside Taylor's cabin, showing Attorney General Morrison's official credentials and government documents spread across the conference table. Karen had just provided additional evidence of her criminal behavior while doubling down on her accusations against state officials. The social media response was immediate and professionally catastrophic. Comments from current and former municipal employees, regulatory professionals, and government officials created a comprehensive record of industry reaction that would follow Karen for the rest of her career. "I worked with Karen Whitmore for 3 years at the Municipal Regulatory Office," wrote former colleague Jennifer Martinez. "Her behavior today is consistent with the abuse of authority and delusional thinking about her enforcement powers that made her impossible to work with. No government agency should ever hire someone who breaks into private property and accuses state officials of corruption." Similar comments from dozens of professional contacts painted a picture of long-standing behavioral problems that had been ignored or tolerated until Karen's public breakdown made her unemployable in any position requiring judgment, discretion, or respect for legal boundaries. The Tennessee Municipal Officers Association issued a statement within 6 hours of the incident. The TMOA condemns the criminal behavior and false accusations made by former regulatory coordinator Karen Whitmore. Her actions do not represent the professional standards expected of municipal employees and demonstrate a fundamental misunderstanding of legal authority and appropriate enforcement procedures. The statement effectively blacklisted Karen from any future government employment in Tennessee while establishing an official record of professional condemnation that would appear in any background check conducted by potential employers. But Karen's professional destruction was accelerating beyond simple employment consequences. The Tennessee Department of Professional Regulation announced an emergency review of all licenses and certifications held by Karen, including her municipal regulatory credentials, HOA management certification, and notary public authorization. Department spokesperson Michael Rodriguez explained the review process during a press conference that was broadcast throughout the state. "When a licensed professional engages in criminal behavior while claiming official authority, we must evaluate whether they meet the character and fitness requirements necessary to maintain professional credentials." Ms. Whitmore's documented behavior raises serious questions about her judgment and respect for legal boundaries. The review process was expedited due to the public nature of Karen's criminal behavior and the comprehensive video evidence of her actions. Within 48 hours, she received certified letters informing her that all professional licenses and certifications had been suspended pending formal disciplinary hearings. The suspension letters were devastating for Karen's career prospects. Without professional credentials, she couldn't work in municipal regulation, HOA management, or any field requiring state licensing. The letters also established an official record of disciplinary action that would appear in any employment verification or professional background check. Meanwhile, the Lake Harmony Homeowners Association was conducting its own damage control operation as board members realized that their president's criminal behavior and public accusations against state officials had created massive liability for the entire organization. Emergency board member Patricia Goldman called an immediate meeting to address what she termed the catastrophic leadership failure that has brought criminal investigation and negative media attention to our community. The meeting minutes, later made public, revealed the board's panic about Karen's behavior and their desperate attempts to distance the organization from her actions. Karen Whitmore's criminal behavior and false accusations against state officials do not represent the values or policies of the Lake Harmony Homeowners Association. The board's official statement read, "We are cooperating fully with law enforcement and will take immediate action to ensure that our community leadership meets appropriate standards of professional conduct and legal compliance." The board's decision was unanimous and immediate. Karen was stripped of all HOA authority, banned from attending meetings, and prohibited from representing herself as a community leader in any capacity. The vote was 6-0, with several board members expressing relief that they could finally address what they described as years of increasingly erratic behavior that had made effective governance impossible. But the most devastating blow to Karen's professional future came from Attorney General Morrison's office, which issued a public statement that would be cited in every news story about the incident and referenced in any background check Karen faced for the rest of her career. This morning's incident demonstrates exactly the type of abuse of authority and disregard for legal boundaries that our HOA oversight investigation was designed to address, Morrison's statement read. Ms. Whitmore's criminal behavior, false accusations against state officials, and complete misunderstanding of legal authority make her unsuitable for any position involving public trust or regulatory responsibility. The statement was particularly damaging because it came from the state's highest law enforcement official and explicitly connected Karen's behavior to ongoing criminal investigations of HOA abuse. Any potential employer who researched Karen's background would find this official condemnation from the Attorney General's office. As evening news broadcasts replayed footage of Karen's break-in and confrontation with state officials, social media amplified the professional destruction with hashtags like HOA Karen and fake government officials that would follow her digital footprint permanently. The Tennessee Bar Association posted on their official Twitter account, "Reminder, breaking into private property and accusing the state attorney general of corruption is not an appropriate method of investigating zoning violations. Professional conduct matters in all government-related positions." The post, which was retweeted thousands of times, used Karen's behavior as an educational example of professional ethics failures while ensuring that her name would be permanently associated with cautionary tales about appropriate conduct in government positions. Karen's evening Facebook post revealed that she still didn't understand the permanence of her career destruction. "The media attacks prove that I was right about celebrity corruption and government conspiracies. Real Americans who dare to investigate suspicious activities face systematic persecution designed to silence truthful reporting about violations of community standards." The post received 847 comments, none of them supportive. Current and former colleagues, professional contacts, and community members used the comments section to document Karen's history of inappropriate behavior, creating a comprehensive public record of why she was unsuitable for any position requiring judgment or authority. As Karen spent her evening responding to comments and defending her actions, she was completely unaware that her professional reputation was being systematically destroyed across every platform, network, and database that potential employers might use to evaluate her suitability for future positions. The transformation was complete and permanent. Karen had gone from municipal regulatory coordinator to unemployable social pariah in less than 12 hours, and she still believed she was fighting corruption rather than committing career suicide. The unemployment office smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams when Karen Whitmore walked through the doors wearing a discount store blazer instead of her signature white tennis outfit. But that industrial cleaning solution was nothing compared to the bitter taste of career failure that would soon fill her mouth when she discovered that no government agency, municipal office, or professional organization in Tennessee would hire someone whose name had become synonymous with criminal behavior and accusations against state attorneys general. But here's the thing about former municipal regulatory coordinators who transform from community leaders to unemployable social pariahs in less than a week. They never realize that some professional disasters are so comprehensive and permanent that even entry-level positions require background checks that reveal their spectacular public breakdown and systematic inability to distinguish between legal authority and felonious behavior. Karen's first job interview after her professional implosion took place at the Davidson County Municipal Services Office, where she'd applied for a basic administrative position that paid $12 an hour and required no special certifications or professional credentials. The job description specified data entry and filing duties that seemed well within Karen's capabilities despite her recently suspended professional licenses. Human Resources Director Margaret Chen had recognized Karen's name from the news coverage but decided to conduct the interview anyway as part of the office's standard hiring process. Chen's notes from the 23-minute interview would later be shared throughout Tennessee's municipal employment network as an example of how not to handle career crisis situations. "Mrs. Whitmore, your resume shows extensive experience in municipal regulation, but there's a significant gap in employment history over the past month," Chen began, reviewing Karen's application with professional courtesy despite knowing exactly why the gap existed. Karen's response revealed that she'd learned nothing from her career destruction and continued to view herself as a victim of political persecution rather than someone who'd committed criminal acts against state officials. "Ms. Chen, I was forced to leave my previous position due to systematic harassment by corrupt celebrities and fake government officials who couldn't tolerate my protection of community standards," she explained, apparently believing that this explanation would improve her employment prospects. Chen's follow-up questions about the systematic harassment led Karen to provide detailed descriptions of her break-in at Taylor Swift's cabin, her confrontation with Attorney General Morrison, and her continued belief that state officials were part of a conspiracy to silence honest municipal employees. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you referring to the incident where you broke into a private residence and accused the state attorney general of corruption?" Chen asked, her professional demeanor barely concealing her amazement at Karen's continued delusions. That's exactly the kind of media propaganda designed to cover up celebrity corruption and government conspiracy, Karen replied, pulling out her phone to show Chen the photographs she'd taken inside Taylor's cabin. I have evidence of illegal government meetings and fraudulent official credentials. The interview ended when Karen attempted to show Chen classified investigation materials she'd photographed during her illegal entry, forcing Chen to explain that displaying potentially stolen government documents during a job interview was not helping her employment prospects. Chen's rejection letter was diplomatically worded but devastating in its professional implications. After careful consideration, we have determined that your qualifications do not align with our organizational needs and professional standards. We wish you success in your future employment endeavors. The rejection was copied to Tennessee's Municipal Employment Database, creating an official record that would flag Karen's name in any future government job searches throughout the state. Karen's second interview at a private HOA management company ended even more quickly when company president David Rodriguez recognized her name and asked directly about her breaking and entering incident. Mrs. Whitmore, our company manages homeowner associations throughout the region, Rodriguez explained. We can't employ someone whose name is associated with criminal behavior and abuse of HOA authority. Our clients would terminate their contracts immediately if they discovered we'd hired you. The rejection was immediate and final, with Rodriguez explaining that Karen's behavior had made her unhirable in any capacity related to community management, property oversight, or residential governance. Similar rejections followed from insurance companies, real estate agencies, and property management firms throughout Tennessee. Karen's name had become toxic in any industry related to her previous experience, forcing her to consider employment in completely unrelated fields. But even retail and service positions proved impossible to obtain, once managers conducted basic internet searches that revealed news coverage of her criminal behavior and accusations against state officials. The hiring manager at a local grocery store chain summed up the problem during Karen's brief interview. "Ma'am, we can't hire someone whose first Google result is a news story about breaking into Taylor Swift's house and calling the Attorney General a fake official." Karen's attempts to explain her behavior as legitimate community protection activities only made potential employers more concerned about her judgment and stability. Her insistence that media coverage was propaganda designed to protect celebrity corruption raised additional questions about her ability to distinguish between reality and conspiracy theories. Meanwhile, the professional consequences of Karen's behavior continued expanding beyond simple employment rejection. The Tennessee Department of Professional Regulation had completed their expedited review of her credentials and issued formal disciplinary actions that would follow her for the rest of her career. The disciplinary report, publicly available through state licensing databases, documented Karen's criminal behavior, false accusations against state officials, and fundamental misunderstanding of legal authority and professional boundaries. The report concluded that Karen lacks the character and fitness necessary for any position involving public trust or regulatory responsibility. The permanent disciplinary record would appear in any professional background check Karen faced for the rest of her career, ensuring that employers in regulated industries would know about her behavioral problems and criminal activities before they even met her. But the most devastating blow to Karen's employment prospects came from the professional reference situation. Her previous supervisors and colleagues contacted by potential employers provided uniformly negative assessments that painted a picture of long-standing behavioral problems that had culminated in her public breakdown. Former supervisor Jennifer Martinez's typical response to reference inquiries became legendary throughout Tennessee's municipal employment network. Karen Whitmore displayed inappropriate aggression, delusional thinking about her authority, and complete inability to accept supervision or criticism. Her criminal behavior and false accusations against the state attorney general represent the logical conclusion of years of escalating behavioral problems. I would not recommend her for any position requiring judgment, discretion, or respect for legal boundaries. Similar references from other colleagues created a comprehensive record of professional concerns that made Karen unemployable in any position requiring character references or employment verification. As Karen's unemployment benefits ran out and her savings dwindled, she began accepting increasingly desperate employment opportunities that didn't require background checks or professional references. Her first job after her career collapse was a part-time position cleaning office buildings at night, paying minimum wage with no benefits or advancement opportunities. The work was physically demanding and professionally humiliating for someone who'd previously held authority over municipal regulatory decisions affecting entire communities. Karen's coworkers, mostly recent immigrants and young people saving money for college, treated her with polite indifference that made her former status as a community leader seem like ancient history. But even these minimal employment opportunities proved unstable, as Karen's inability to accept supervision and her continued belief in conspiracy theories made her difficult to work with and impossible to trust with responsibilities. Her supervisor at the cleaning company, Maria Rodriguez, documented Karen's behavioral problems in reports that would be used to justify her termination after just 6 weeks. Employee Whitmore repeatedly questions management decisions, makes inappropriate comments about government corruption, and attempts to establish authority over other workers despite having no supervisory role. Her behavior creates tension and disrupts workplace efficiency. The termination was Karen's third job loss in 4 months, creating an employment pattern that would make future positions even more difficult to obtain and maintain. Meanwhile, Karen's financial situation was deteriorating as rapidly as her professional prospects. Her Lake Harmony mansion, purchased during her successful municipal career, required monthly payments that far exceeded her minimum wage earnings from temporary and part-time positions. The mortgage company had begun foreclosure proceedings after Karen missed 3 consecutive payments, forcing her to list the property for immediate sale at a significant loss. The real estate agent handling the sale reported difficulty finding buyers due to the negative publicity associated with Karen's name and the property's connection to her criminal activities. Potential buyers research the property's history and discover news stories about Mrs. Whitmore's break-in incident and accusations against state officials, the agent explained. They're concerned about purchasing a home associated with someone who's been portrayed as unstable and criminally inclined. The property eventually sold for $200,000 less than Karen's purchase price, leaving her with significant debt and forcing her to relocate to a modest apartment in a less desirable neighborhood where her notoriety was less likely to affect her housing prospects. But Karen's financial problems extended beyond mortgage difficulties. Legal fees from her criminal defense attorney, combined with civil liability from her break-in incident, had consumed most of her savings and retirement investments. Attorney General Morrison's office had filed comprehensive criminal charges related to Karen's cabin break-in, including breaking and entering, criminal trespass, and interference with government business. The legal fees for defending against these charges exceeded $40,000, money that Karen had been forced to borrow against her remaining assets. As Karen sat in her small apartment, wearing discount store clothing instead of designer tennis outfits and applying for minimum wage positions that would barely cover her basic living expenses, the transformation from municipal regulatory coordinator to unemployable social pariah was mathematically complete. Her professional destruction had been so comprehensive and public that recovery seemed impossible. Every potential employer could easily discover her criminal behavior and professional misconduct through simple internet searches that revealed news coverage, disciplinary records, and professional condemnation from the state highest officials. The lesson was permanent and career-ending. Some professional mistakes are so spectacular and public that they create irreversible damage to employment prospects, personal reputation, and financial stability that follows you for the rest of your working life. The local diner smelled like grease and desperation when Karen Whitmore started her new job as a weekend dishwasher, trading her former authority over municipal regulatory decisions for the privilege of scraping food remnants from plates while wearing a hairnet that made her faded blonde highlights look like institutional compliance rather than expensive salon maintenance. But here's the thing about former HOA presidents who've fallen from community leadership to minimum wage food service. They never realize that some career collapses create such comprehensive social isolation that even coworkers at the bottom of the economic ladder treat them with suspicion and contempt rather than solidarity and understanding. The industrial dishwasher's steam made Karen's discount store uniform cling to her diminished frame, while the constant noise provided soundtrack to her realization that professional reputation destruction extends far beyond employment difficulties into complete social ostracism that affects every human interaction. Karen's adjustment to minimum wage employment revealed the full scope of her social transformation. Her co-workers at Murphy's Family Diner consisted primarily of high school students saving money for college, recent immigrants working multiple jobs to support their families, and older adults who'd never held positions requiring professional credentials or community respect. None of them knew about Karen's previous career or community leadership role, but they instinctively recognized something different about her attitude and demeanor that made workplace relationships difficult and uncomfortable. Her inability to accept direction from supervisors half her age, combined with her continued belief that she deserved respect based on her former authority, created persistent tension that isolated her from potential workplace friendships. Diner manager Bobby Martinez documented Karen's behavioral problems in weekly reports that painted a picture of someone fundamentally unsuited for collaborative employment. Employee Whitmore frequently questions operational procedures, makes inappropriate comments about management decisions, and attempts to establish authority over other workers despite being the newest and least experienced team member. The reports also noted Karen's habit of discussing conspiracy theories about celebrity corruption and government persecution during breaks, conversations that made her coworkers uncomfortable and reinforced their perception that she was unstable and potentially dangerous. But Karen's social isolation extended far beyond workplace difficulties. Her forced relocation to a modest apartment complex had placed her among neighbors who recognized her name from news coverage and treated her with suspicion and avoidance that made simple daily activities uncomfortable and stressful. Apartment manager Jennifer Rodriguez explained the situation during a conversation with prospective tenants who'd inquired about the complex's safety and security. "We have one resident who was involved in some criminal activity involving celebrities and government officials. She keeps to herself, but other tenants are uncomfortable with her presence and concerned about potential problems." The explanation, while factually accurate, ensured that Karen's reputation followed her even into housing situations where she might have hoped for anonymity and fresh starts. Her neighbors' reactions ranged from polite avoidance to active hostility. Mrs. Patterson from apartment 3B had researched Karen's background after recognizing her name and made her findings known throughout the complex. "That woman broke into Taylor Swift's house and accused the Attorney General of being fake. She's clearly unstable and potentially dangerous." The reputation meant that Karen's attempts at normal social interactions were met with suspicion and rejection that reinforced her growing isolation and paranoia about being systematically persecuted for her protection of community standards. Meanwhile, the long-term consequences of Karen's professional destruction continued manifesting in ways that extended far beyond employment and housing difficulties. Her criminal charges related to the cabin break-in had been resolved through a plea agreement that included probation, community service, and mandatory psychological counseling. But the legal record created permanent barriers to many forms of social participation. The background check requirements for volunteer positions, community organizations, and civic activities meant that Karen was excluded from most opportunities for social engagement and community involvement that might have provided alternative sources of identity and purpose. Her attempt to volunteer at the local animal shelter ended when the background check revealed her criminal conviction, and the organization's volunteer coordinator explained that they couldn't accept help from someone with a record of breaking and entering. "We work with vulnerable animals and need volunteers who demonstrate respect for property rights and legal boundaries." Similar rejections from churches, community centers, and charitable organizations created a pattern of social exclusion that reinforced Karen's belief that she was being systematically punished for her previous efforts to maintain community standards. But the most devastating aspect of Karen's social isolation was the complete breakdown of her family relationships. Her sister Patricia had initially tried to maintain contact and provide emotional support, but Karen's inability to acknowledge her mistakes and continued insistence on conspiracy theories had gradually destroyed their relationship. Patricia's final conversation with Karen, conducted over the phone while Karen was working her dishwashing shift, captured the family's exhaustion with her behavioral problems and delusional thinking. "Karen, I've tried to help you understand that what you did was wrong and illegal, but you keep insisting that you were protecting the community from corruption," Patricia explained with obvious frustration. "You broke into someone's house and accused the state attorney general of being fake. That's not community protection, that's criminal behavior." Karen's response revealed that her isolation had only strengthened her delusional beliefs rather than prompting self-reflection or behavioral change. "Patricia, you've been brainwashed by the same media propaganda that protects celebrity corruption. I was investigating legitimate violations of community standards, and now I'm being punished for refusing to participate in the cover-up." The conversation ended with Patricia explaining that she could no longer maintain contact with someone who refused to acknowledge reality or take responsibility for their actions. The family abandonment was final and comprehensive, leaving Karen without any support system beyond the minimal social services available to low-income workers. As Karen's social isolation deepened, her financial situation continued deteriorating despite her employment at the diner. The combination of minimum wage income, legal fees, and debt from her home foreclosure meant that she was barely able to afford basic living expenses while facing ongoing financial obligations from her previous lifestyle. Her attempts to seek financial assistance from government programs designed to help low-income workers were complicated by her criminal record and the negative publicity associated with her name. Social services workers recognized her from news coverage and treated her applications with additional scrutiny that delayed assistance and created additional bureaucratic barriers. The Food Assistance Program coordinator explained the additional requirements Karen faced due to her background. Given the publicity surrounding your case and the concerns about your judgment and stability, we need additional documentation and verification before approving benefits. Your situation requires supervisor review and extended processing time. The delays and additional requirements meant that Karen often went without adequate food while waiting for assistance that might or might not be approved, creating physical health problems that compounded her psychological and social difficulties. 6 months after her professional collapse, Karen's transformation was mathematically complete. She had gone from municipal regulatory coordinator earning $58,000 annually to dishwasher earning $7.25 per hour. Her social status had declined from community leader to social pariah. Her living situation had changed from lakefront mansion to subsidized apartment where neighbors avoided contact and management viewed her as a potential problem. But perhaps most significantly, her identity had shifted from someone who believed she had authority and importance to someone who was systematically excluded from all forms of social participation and community involvement. The psychological impact of such comprehensive life collapse was evident in Karen's deteriorating physical appearance and increasingly erratic behavior. Co-workers at the diner reported that she often talked to herself during work, muttering about conspiracy theories and persecution while performing her dishwashing duties with mechanical precision that suggested dissociation from her circumstances. Her supervisor's final evaluation before her inevitable termination captured the complete breakdown of someone who'd lost everything that had previously defined her sense of self and purpose. Employee Whitmore appears to be experiencing significant psychological distress and has become increasingly disconnected from workplace reality. Her behavior suggests she may need professional mental health intervention rather than continued employment. The termination from her dishwashing job marked the complete destruction of Karen's ability to maintain even minimal social and economic participation in society. Her professional reputation was destroyed, her financial resources were exhausted, her family relationships were severed, and her psychological state was deteriorating beyond her ability to function in normal employment situations. As Karen sat in her small apartment, wearing discount store clothing, and facing eviction notices while writing increasingly incoherent social media posts about celebrity corruption and government persecution, the mathematical precision of her social destruction was undeniable. She had transformed from community leader to complete social outcast through a series of decisions that had seemed logical to her at the time, but had proven catastrophically destructive to every aspect of her life and identity. The homeless shelter smelled like industrial soap and institutional disinfection when Karen Whitmore arrived carrying her possessions in 2 discount store shopping bags. But that chemical odor was nothing compared to the bitter reality that would soon settle in her consciousness when she realized that some career collapses are so complete and irreversible that even society's safety net systems treat you as a cautionary tale rather than someone deserving assistance and rehabilitation. The fluorescent lighting made everyone look tired and defeated, but Karen's transformation from municipal regulatory coordinator to homeless shelter resident represented a mathematical precision in social destruction that social workers would study as an example of how professional mistakes can cascade into total life collapse faster than anyone thinks possible. Karen's intake interview at the Davidson County Emergency Housing Facility was conducted by social worker Maria Santos, who recognized Karen's name from the extensive news coverage but maintained professional objectivity while documenting her case for the shelter's records. "Mrs. Whitmore, I need to understand your current situation and the circumstances that brought you here," Santos began, reviewing Karen's application with the careful attention required for someone whose background included criminal charges and significant media attention. Karen's response revealed that months of social isolation and psychological pressure had done nothing to improve her insight into her situation or her responsibility for the consequences she was facing. "Mrs. Santos, I'm here because I was systematically persecuted for protecting community standards against celebrity corruption and government conspiracy," she explained, apparently believing that this narrative would generate sympathy rather than concern about her mental stability. Santos documented Karen's continued delusional thinking while noting the practical challenges of providing services to someone whose behavior had made her unsuitable for most forms of social support and community integration. The shelter's policies required background checks for all residents due to safety concerns for vulnerable populations, and Karen's criminal record combined with her history of confrontational behavior toward authority figures created additional complications for her housing situation. Mrs. Whitmore, your background check reveals criminal charges related to breaking and entering and confronting government officials, Santos explained carefully. While we don't automatically exclude people with criminal records, we need additional assessment to ensure community safety and your ability to follow shelter rules. The additional assessment revealed the full scope of Karen's psychological deterioration and her complete inability to function appropriately in supervised living environments. Her evaluation session with shelter psychologist Dr. Rebecca Martinez documented persistent paranoid thinking, delusional beliefs about persecution, and ongoing inability to acknowledge responsibility for her circumstances. Dr. Martinez's report was comprehensive and concerning. Client exhibits significant psychological distress characterized by paranoid ideation, persecution complex, and complete disconnection from the reality of her situation. She continues to view her criminal behavior as legitimate community protection and interprets all consequences as evidence of systematic persecution. Prognosis for successful shelter integration is poor due to her inability to accept supervision or acknowledge behavioral problems. The psychological evaluation recommended that Karen receive intensive mental health treatment before being considered suitable for group housing situations, but the waiting lists for appropriate mental health services extended several months into the future. Meanwhile, Taylor Swift's response to becoming inadvertently involved in Karen's professional destruction had evolved into comprehensive advocacy for mental health services and community support systems that could prevent similar breakdowns in the future. The Taylor Swift Foundation for Community Mental Health had been established with initial funding of $10 million specifically to address the gap between professional career crisis and adequate mental health intervention. The Foundation's mission focused on providing emergency psychological services to individuals whose professional mistakes had triggered comprehensive life collapse. Karen Whitmore's situation, while extreme, represents a pattern we see repeatedly in communities across the country, Taylor explained during the Foundation's inaugural press conference. Professional mistakes escalate into criminal behavior, which leads to social isolation and psychological breakdown. We need intervention systems that address these cascading problems before they become irreversible. The Foundation's first major initiative was the Professional Crisis Intervention Program, which provided immediate mental health services, career counseling, and financial assistance to individuals whose professional mistakes had triggered comprehensive life collapse. The program was designed to prevent the kind of total social destruction that Karen had experienced. Attorney General Morrison had used Karen's case as the foundation for comprehensive HOA oversight legislation that passed the Tennessee legislature with bipartisan support. The Community Standards Accountability Act required mental health screening for HOA board members, mandatory training on legal boundaries of enforcement authority, and state oversight of associations with histories of harassment complaints. The Whitmore case demonstrated how unchecked authority combined with psychological instability can destroy both individual lives and community harmony, Morrison explained during the bill signing ceremony. This legislation ensures that community leadership positions include appropriate safeguards and support systems. The law also established the Community Leadership Mental Health Fund, which provided counseling services to HOA officials experiencing stress related to their governance responsibilities. The fund was designed to identify and address psychological problems before they escalated into criminal behavior or community disruption. But perhaps the most significant long-term impact was the research initiative that Karen's case had inspired. The University of Tennessee's Social Psychology Department had received a $2 million grant to study the intersection of professional authority, psychological instability, and criminal behavior in community governance situations. The research project, led by Dr. Jennifer Martinez, was producing findings that revolutionized understanding of how relatively minor authority positions could trigger psychological breakdowns in individuals predisposed to paranoid thinking and persecution complexes. The Whitmore case provides a perfect example of how professional authority can amplify existing psychological problems until they manifest as criminal behavior and comprehensive life collapse, Dr. Martinez explained during a conference on community governance and mental health. Early intervention could have prevented both her criminal behavior and her subsequent social destruction. The research was being used to develop screening tools that could identify potentially problematic candidates for community leadership positions before they gained authority that they were psychologically unsuited to handle responsibly. Meanwhile, Lake Harmony had undergone a comprehensive transformation under new HOA leadership that emphasized mental health support, conflict resolution, and collaborative community governance. The new board, led by retired social worker Patricia Goldman, had implemented policies designed to prevent the kind of systematic harassment that Karen had perpetrated while providing support for residents experiencing personal or professional difficulties. The community's property values had recovered and exceeded their pre-Karen levels, with real estate agents marketing Lake Harmony as a model for reformed community governance and mental health-conscious residential living. The presence of Taylor's continued residence had become a selling point, symbolizing the community's commitment to protecting residents from harassment while maintaining appropriate privacy and respect. As Karen spent her days in the homeless shelter writing increasingly incoherent journal entries about celebrity corruption and government persecution, the positive changes inspired by her professional destruction continued expanding throughout Tennessee and beyond. The Professional Crisis Intervention Program had already helped 47 individuals whose career mistakes had triggered psychological breakdowns, providing mental health services and support systems that prevented the kind of total life collapse that Karen had experienced. The Community Standards Accountability Act had been adopted as model legislation by 12 other states, creating nationwide reforms in HOA oversight and community leadership screening that protected both residents and officials from the kind of systematic problems that had destroyed Karen's life and career. Most importantly, the research inspired by Karen's case was producing early warning systems that could identify and address psychological problems in community leadership before they escalated into criminal behavior or comprehensive social breakdown. Karen's complete life collapse had accidentally created one of the most comprehensive mental health and community governance reform initiatives in recent American history, providing protection and support for thousands of families while preventing similar breakdowns in communities across the country. The mathematical precision was striking. Karen's individual destruction had generated positive changes that extended far beyond her personal situation to create lasting improvements in community governance, mental health services, and crisis intervention systems that would protect future generations from similar breakdowns. As Karen sat in the homeless shelter common room, wearing donated clothing and writing conspiracy theories in a notebook she'd found in the Lost and Found box, the memorial garden at Lake Harmony was being dedicated in honor of comprehensive community governance reform and mental health awareness. The garden featured educational displays about recognizing signs of psychological distress in community leaders, resources for mental health intervention, and testimonials from families who'd been helped by the programs inspired by Karen's case. The dedication plaque read, "In recognition that even the most destructive human behavior can inspire positive change when communities respond with compassion, accountability, and commitment to preventing similar tragedies through improved mental health services and governance reform." Karen Whitmore had intended to protect her community from celebrity corruption and maintain traditional standards through systematic enforcement and confrontation with perceived threats. Instead, she had accidentally created the most comprehensive community mental health and governance reform initiative in Tennessee history, while destroying her own life through criminal behavior that she still couldn't acknowledge or understand. The lesson was permanent and mathematically precise. Some professional mistakes create such comprehensive life collapse that recovery becomes impossible, but the positive changes inspired by even the most destructive behavior can create lasting improvements that prevent similar tragedies for future generations, while providing hope that human communities can learn from individual failures to build better support systems for everyone.